I was so sure that like I win that award, and then it was going to feel as if my dad looked at me and said, "Son, I'm proud of you." And when it didn't, it broke me.
Welcome to the Refining Flame podcast, where we hear from Christian leaders who share stories of refinement through the work of the Holy Spirit in their life. I'm your host, as always, Ryan Shieh, and I'm here with a good friend, Mr. Joshua Broome.
Let's go.
Man, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
It's good to have you on campus. I know you're a Liberty alum, technically.
Yeah.
Big Liberty fan.
Absolutely.
So we're excited to have you, man. Before we start, I want to jump right into your
Yeah.
story, but before we start, just to tell you, bro, I have been always been so encouraged by you and your story. But the more I've gotten to know you, your heart is just sold out for wanting people to know Jesus. And so I appreciate that. I know how much you love him and how much you love his people. And so I'm grateful for our friendship, the mentor you are to me, and the mentor you are to so many, bro. So,
absolutely.
Thanks for being
here. Man, I'll never forget, like, such a special moment, like getting to do convo here, and you and Zach gave me an intro that made me tear up. You know, it was just cool to see, because that was such a kind of a culminating moment in my life. Because I remember when I first started taking classes here at Liberty, I was kind of like, man, do my peers like know my story?
Sure,
Does my story matter? Like, to these professors, like this guy's like pursuing an education, like biblical theology, like Christian ministry, stuff like that. Like, what is he doing? And as my view of God was elevated, that my view of self was not necessarily minimalized, but it put in a right view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And get to preach Ephesians 2:10. It's like, man, if you understand that the God that made you, formed you out of dirt, breathed his own breath into you and put purpose in you, and if you live in that purpose, whatever is holding you back or keeping you stuck, it loses its awe. It loses its that stronghold on you. And that was just a special moment. So thank you for
absolutely, bro.
Yeah.
That's funny. I remember kind of a funny story. I was at the gym and Josh Rutledge texted me.
Yeah.
And he's like, because I told him the semester before, I was like, we gotta get Broome here. He's gotta come here. And he was like, do you know anyone who knows Joshua? Because they would do the videos and the intros and stuff. And so then he was like, I was like, me and Zach would be perfect source. So it all worked out well, man.
Yeah, that was sick.
Before we start, again, I told you last night, bro, even like looking at you and your family and your kids, your boys, and your wife, man, like I love Jesus more because of your story and everything that you do, bro. So super excited to have you. For the elephant in the room, before you start, so you spent, is it 10 years?
Almost 7.
Almost 7 years in the porn industry.
Yeah.
God has radically changed your life, and you're impacting people all over the world. And so I know just from being around here at Liberty and just having, just the position I am with students around here, pornography is something that is heavily involved within our students with addictions and all that kind of stuff. And so we'd love to hear your story, bro. Kind of your time in the industry, how you got out of it, how you met Jesus. And so just bring us along that ride.
Yeah. I think to kind of set up the story in the right framing at the start, childhood. Because it was me growing up in a place, in South Carolina, in a small city, and my mom was 15 when I was born. My dad was also 15, and my dad lived in close enough proximity where I knew his name, I knew his family, I knew what he did, I knew what he looked like. His dad, my grandfather, even owned a store that was called Rogers, which is his name, across the street from the little restaurant that my mom worked at most of my life. And I would sit at that restaurant and look across the street at a life that, my grandpa and my dad were there often, but I wasn't invited into. Yep. And, just the way that your brain is created, it's like, what doesn't make sense to me as a child or even as an adult, I have to make sense of what doesn't make sense. And what made sense to me was that if I wasn't invited into this relationship with my dad, there must be something wrong with me. And if there's something wrong with me, maybe I can be the solution. And maybe if I become enough and do enough and earn enough, get enough high fives and accolades and awards, maybe I would feel like I was enough. If I did enough, I would become enough in my own eyes. And that was, really the thing that fueled me to become good student, good athlete. Everything that I did, I wanted to be the best and I wanted to win, but I wanted to win for the wrong reasons. Like, having a high achiever
Sure, yeah.
personality is
finding identity, I would assume.
Yeah, absolutely. I was building an identity of, of crowns of my own accord to outweigh the weight and the pain of the lack that I had. And, so I became a good student. I became a good athlete. I did all this stuff. And then around 13, it was like the weirdest year of my life because I was walking through this mall and someone like saw me and they're like, "Hey, have you ever considered modeling?" And it was like one of those like old school like model search things. There was this, and I was with my mom, and I met with this lady and she pretty much like signed me right away. And I started doing like local commercials, like nothing crazy. But, all of a sudden I had more money than, as a 13-year-old I ever, thought possible. And so I was getting affirmation and words of affirmation, approval, stuff like that. But in that same year, that summer, I was at my cousin's house and he knew where his dad's porn stash was. And it was like magazines and videos, and he brought them out, and I was like, man, it's like in my head, because like God's word is written on our heart. And so it's like I knew when I saw what I saw that I should not have looked, yet at the same time I had a difficult time looking away. It was curiosity and shame kind of colliding together. So it's almost like if you're looking through, you're trying to cover up your eyes, but you're still peeking through. And that did something in me, and I thought, man, maybe this is what relationships, intimacy, love is between a man and a woman, because I didn't have a biblical foundation. I didn't have a example of, because I never was in a home where my mom was married and it was a healthy situation. She was married, but from the time I was like 7 to 11 or 12, it was not a good situation, not a healthy situation. But so I never had a visible example of what it meant to have any kind of like male leadership, male role model, any depiction of what intimacy, relationships, love was in that way. Like my mom's amazing, is amazing, was amazing, but I never saw like outside of the few friendships that she had. And so that, that discipled me, because I would say like that's why pornography is so problematic in our culture, because we spend 8 to 10 hours on our phones, and those phones are discipling us far more than people in biblical content is discipling us. And if you're watching pornography, well, it's shaping your view of both people, because it's commodifying a person. You're instead of the initial thought where I should love people and use things, I start to love things and use people. And because it's like it's a picture or a video, but it's a person created in the image of God. And if I think that without any regard I can just look and take and that not impact my heart and my mind, that's Satan's plan. That's Satan's scheme for you to believe that that's not going to be an input that determines the output. That's not going to change the way that you see people and the way that you engage with people. And you start to develop these presuppositions about that maybe this is what sex and intimacy is about. Maybe this is what women are for. And that's really what I believed. I thought, okay, maybe if I can hook up with girls, that would fill some kind of gap in my life. And I lost my virginity around 14 and started living that way. And that led me to college, and I was playing basketball, and I was in a fraternity, and I was removed from what accountability I had, which, just caused more disaster and destruction in my life. And then my agent convinced me, hey, if you're doing really well. So it's like I was more. It was interesting because I was more successful at modeling than I was acting, but I wanted to. I just wanted to act.
Sure.
But like modeling, it provided, like the pursuit of acting provided opportunities for modeling, and the manager that I had did
best of both worlds.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes one would open the door for the other.
Yeah, I got you.
But I was frustrated that like I kept getting all these modeling opportunities and like the acting opportunities you really had to fight for, because once you're established as a model, it's like you have your portfolio where it's like, this is what he looks like. These are, designers that he's worked for in the past. Yeah, I want that guy or no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Acting, it's like, okay, let
Sure.
me
It's like,
see
what have
your
you
real,
done?
what have you done? And now come audition. Okay, now there's a callback audition again for this specific part. You read for a vague part. Let's have you read for a specific part. So it's so much more of a grind and a process. And for someone that like lives and dies by people's approval, and it's like, you got this fear element, you want to succeed. But anyway, my manager was like, it would be advantageous for you to move to LA because you'd be closer to the industry you want to be in. And proximity is important because, because you're not established yet, there's stuff that kind of like is last minute where it's like, there's an audition today. It's like if you're in South Carolina, you got to get on a plane, and so it's just like proximity is your friend when you're like you're like a mid tier, but you're trying to make it. Like that would be the step that would kind of propel you to the next level. So I'm like, okay, great, and I moved there, and doors start opening, everything's going great. I love where I'm living. I'm living at kind of like the bottom of Laurel Canyon, like as it crosses Sunset Boulevard. So like I'm living in the heart of Hollywood, like in the middle of everything, and got access to everything and everyone, and love my roommates, love life, and wasn't rich, but like everything was great.
Yeah, sure.
And then I was at this bar, and these three girls walked up to me, and they were headhunters for the porn industry, where they were hired by a porn agent, and they were pretty girls, and they would go around starting conversation with attractive guys, attractive girls, saying, "Hey, would you ever consider doing porn? If so, I want to give you this card, and my agent would love to meet you. And if you, essentially, if you would agree to meet with them, and then you sign with them, like they would get compensated for that."
Yeah.
So, these girls walk up to me and they're like, "Would you ever want to do porn?" I'm just like, what? Because I think it really paints an interesting picture, because when someone asks me if I wanted to do porn, like when it first pops into your mind, you just think like, well, you want to pay me to have, sex with, someone, and someone films it or whatever. But for me, and just like, if you really lean into the tension of that, you probably don't like foresee that as like a real industry. Like no one thinks, for the most part, like, oh, you know what I want to do when I, finish college or turn 18 is do porn. And we live in a strange world where that is true in some cases, but it's incredibly broken circumstances. But when I was asked that, it was almost like because I'd been watching porn, so I was now 22 at the time, and I'd been watching porn since I was 13 and hooking up. It was like because of my brokenness, or my, the so much sin that I had ingested, I couldn't see it for what it was. So when they asked me, "Hey, do you want to do porn?" It was almost like it was inviting me into this like fictitious reality. It's like it's like it's real.
Yeah.
People really do this. People really get paid for this. This is a career.
At least from like an acting standpoint, I think a lot of, I'm telling you what I'm speaking about on students, no one's thinking like that's a job.
Sure.
No one's thinking that.
Yeah. And so it's like I hear that, and so it's twofold. It's like it's intriguing, but it's also, it's like you don't see the danger for what it is. Like you don't see that it's poison because it has a different label on it, because the way you saw it. And so I was like, I don't know. And then because they use manipulative language, so it's like, because they're in a place where most people are creatives, they're like acting or wanting to do music or something of that sort. So they were like, "Hey, well, you'll meet with our agent. It's at the agency, and then you'll do an interview with him. It's not like you're going to go to like, hey, you're going to meet with this pimp at a Motel 6, And it's like, if it would have been presented for what it was, then I would have said no. So I was like, I guess I'll go see about it. And I go in, I meet with this guy, and it's in this like really nice like business complex adjacent to Universal Studios in this, in Studio City, which is a very nice area. And they bring me into the parking garage, and it's like Beamers and Bentleys everywhere. And I go into his office, and strangely, in the same way that if you went to my modeling agency, he would walk down a hallway where people that he represented, it would be, if you'd been on, GQ or whatever, like magazine, if you made a cover, they were proud of that, and they were framed in the hallway. In the same way, at this porn agent, if you'd been on, whatever porn magazine on the cover, then they were on the walls. And I was like, this is weird, and I go in the waiting area. There's porn on the coffee table, as you're waiting to go into his office. And I go into his office, and the first question he asked me was, how did I grow up? Which should have been like a red flag, because is my family dynamic? Like, is that an important part of my life? Sure. But at a job interview, the first question you asked me, because it was a value proposition, it was saying, hey, is there anything that is broken or missing in your life, that I can extract information from you so that I can use that against you to manipulate you against, in a way that you'll do what I want you to do. So it's in my best interest. So when I said, yeah, I grew up pretty much me and my mom, he's like, oh, perfect, and then
Pickens.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I can feel that need, like you've got, he thought, oh, you got daddy issues, so perfect. You need words of affirmation, you need stuff status in words.
Yep.
So he leaned into that. He's like, man, because you have acting experience, like, the porn industry is shifting. They're doing all these parodies, and you can be the lead in all these films. Like, you'll be famous. You'll make all this money. Like, you'll have the life. What do you think? And I was just like, man, I said, maybe I'll do one. And I did one, and it was everything. It was the opposite of everything I thought it would be. And that I thought it was gonna, like, I was just gonna go hook up with this pretty girl, and I'm on like a full set. There's catering, there's hair and makeup, like all out in the open, and then there's a girl that's waiting on me. And the only time that I had I never had a conversation with her. The only time that I saw her real name was that I had to sign that I saw her IDs. And kind of like your work permit to work in that industry is every 27 days, you have to have a new full panel STDs test and an HIV and AIDS test. Wow. So it was like you had to see, okay, this is who she is. Her name matches, the test. Okay, great. And I had to sign that I saw that. And that was the only like knowledge of who it was. And then, they kind of just like waved me into the sea of lights, asked after saying, hey, you ever done this before? No. Okay, here's a Viagra, take it. I bite it in half if you've never used one before. And I was just like so overwhelmed. Crazy, so I just like popped it, drank water. And like even in the few minutes I had before I did it, the agent had sent a car to pick me up. And I was like, okay, I can just drive there. I can just get myself there. Like, oh, no, we want to take care of you. And again, it's these tactics of manipulation, because it's almost like you get to set, you're in a place where you don't really know where you are. And to leave, it's almost like you would be a kid at a sleepover that wanted to go home.
Right.
So I would
to get out on
your
own. Yeah.
So I just like, shame forced my hand, even though my hand wasn't forced. Shame forced my hand, and I did what I didn't really want to do in that moment. And like people would think porn is like you're taking a peek into this moment where two people are having this like moment of intimacy. It's almost like if you've ever seen this like crazy fight scene. Like I love the example of like there's this like fight scene in Inception, and in this elevator, and it's like there's slow-mo, and there's like there's all this stuff going on, but like you wouldn't see that and think that just happened to be captured on a camera in the elevator. Well, there was like multiple cameras. There was choreography. There's paid actors. There were, it was editing and post. Maybe some CGI was added in there. Wow. So in the same way, like when you see a porn, you don't see me taking erectile dysfunction medication before I do it. You don't see the girl using numbing cream before she does it. You don't see, a sleazy director like trying to get the girl to do something with him that he would pay her extra for under the table, and she feels like she has to say yes, because if she doesn't say yes, she won't be invited back. And in that industry, it's like you don't say no because you say yes to selling yourself for sex, and then you become an object. It's believed to be that your only value is selling yourself for sex, and if that's the only thing that you can say yes to, you never say no to it. So your no loses its validity because you have to say yes to everything.
So dark, bro.
So it's like, there's this director telling you what to do, how to do it, and even like how to finish. So like everything is like edited and manipulated, and you're being told what to do, and it's not like 2 moments of like intimacy that feels good. It's a performance that looks good, because you're not doing it for one another, you're doing it for the camera. Like even like what you're doing, it has to be seen, not felt.
Yeah.
So I was just like, this was disgusting. I feel disgusting. And it's like, after that scene, have you seen Redeeming Love?
I've heard of it. Haven't seen it
yet. There's this one scene that when I saw it, I just wept and wept and wept, because like it really captured how you would feel like regarding sexual sin, because the Bible talks about like sexual sin is not only, sin, but it's sin against your own body. And it's like, there's a scene, and this is how I felt also. There's a scene where there's a girl that she's working at a brothel. She meets a guy. He's a believer. He wants her to get out of that place, and he convinces her to leave. They end up getting married, and she's in this, like, he's got this cottage like in the middle of nowhere, and she's in this place, and like peace and quiet sounds like chaos when chaos is the only thing you've ever known. So when she's sitting there in this like beautiful house, and he's out working, and she's just sitting there, and she's like so like overwhelmed with anxiety because she's never experienced peace and quiet. And she ends up going back to the brothel, and she does something that she deeply regrets and doesn't even necessarily want to do. And then after the fact, there's this scene where she's in this like river, and she's got a rock, and she's trying to scrub off of her something that's not on the outside, it's in the inside. And that's how I felt. That's the shower that I took after I did that first scene, and I was like, I'll never do that again. And then it blew up my life. Because I believed that I could do that and it not come into light. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but it was a large production, a popular site, and I had a few people saw it. And I come from a place where, it only takes one person to know one thing for everyone to know everything. So word got around, and word eventually got to my uncle. Then it got to my mom, and my mom, was like, did you do this? And yeah, I did. And I just felt like humiliated, and she was hurt by it and frustrated with me. And then I get a call from my manager, and she was like, I hate to do this, but we can't be associated with you now that you've done that. So we have to let you go. We can't represent you anymore. So I'm just like, man, I've blown up my life. And for some reason, it's like, the only thing that made sense was for me to continue doing the thing that blew up my life. But if I'm honest, even though it was a lie, because again, I was 22, like educated, like capable. The fact that I believed the only thing that I could do was porn is ridiculous. But that's the scary thing about a lie.
Yeah.
If you believe a lie to be true, it seems as if it's true to you, and you live through that lens. And so I was like, okay, I guess this is what I'll do. And that embarked, a nearly 7-year journey of me saying, well, if I'm going to do this, it's like, if we're hooping or, eating chicken wings or whatever it is, like I want to win. I want to be the best,
Yep.
I love you, but it's like, I want to beat you,
Sure.
And then, there's seasons in my life where it's like, if I'm trying to honor God with like giving it my best, because excellence honors God, work ethic honors God, those can be good and godly things. But for me, it's like I needed to win to prove to you and to prove to myself that I was worth something, because I didn't believe that I actually was. And so I thought, okay, if I make, X amount of dollars, win X amount of awards, become the best in that industry, then that would somehow like mitigate the deficit that I had mentally and emotionally. And, I won all the awards there was to win. I made millions of dollars. And I thought that those things, both the awards and the metric of dollars, like, I set those things, and it's like, the first time that I would make $1 million in a year, it's like there would be something about seeing that additional, comma in my bank account that was going to do something in my soul. And I really believed that. And then when money didn't fix what only Jesus could, I was like, man. So the anxiety that I already had, it didn't go away. It was amplified. The depression that I already had, it didn't go away. It was deepened. And in 2012, I won Performer of the Year, which is like the biggest award you could win. And like when I heard my name called and I had the award and I looked at it and I saw not even my name but a fictitious name, because you go by a pseudonym in that industry, you don't go by your name. And I saw that and I was like, I was so sure that like I win that award, and then it was going to feel as if my dad looked at me and said, "Son, I'm proud of you." And when it didn't, it broke me. And I tried to take my life 6 times. And the last time I tried to take my life, I went to a bank, and I had never done this, but I handed a check to a teller to deposit. Normally I would do Dropbox or just do it in an anonymous way, because on the memo of the check, it was clearly described what I was being compensated for. They would do this like as, in
any other check.
Yeah, yep. But they would put the most lewd, crude things possible on the memo of the check, because their objective day in and day out was to chip away at your humanity. Like even the fact, like, okay, I'm gonna make you famous. You're gonna be the guy. What do you want to go by? Because if I change your name, then there's going to be this belief that, well, it's not really me doing those things. Like if you think about like an internet troll, more often than not, it's going to be a person with a meme for a photo in an obscure username, because there's this belief that if I put this fictitious barrier between myself and how I'm perceived, then I'm not going to reap the repercussions of my actions, because it's not really me. So that's what they want you to believe. If I can remove an aspect of your humanity, you'll agree to do something that is probably dehumanizing, not glorifying, but it's not really you. And so I go into that bank, slide the check across the counter, and I wanted her to like agree with me, say, "Hey, you're as gross as you think you are," and that would be like fantastic. And I was going to go and in my life, and instead, there was, for some reason, there was not a lot of people in the bank that day. And when I slid the check across the counter, she didn't say anything. And I don't even know if she looked at it, looked at the memo. She probably just, normally, account number, blah, 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 here's your receipt. But when she slid me the receipt, I just started to sob, because like I needed her. I was so dependent on other people for my feelings that when she didn't give me what I wanted, I didn't know what to do. And I just broke. And she came around the corner, come around the counter and put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, "Joshua, how can I help you? Joshua, are you okay?" And I wasn't okay. And when she said my name, that was the first time that I heard my name in almost 18 months. Because my mom and my friends, they continue to call and text, but I stopped answering. And it wasn't because I didn't want to talk to them. It was because like people that really loved me were not affirming the life that I was living. They were, "What are you doing? You got to stop this." Because they saw people dying left and right around me. Like standing here today, there's now 49 people who have died of suicide or overdose that were my peers in that industry, that should have a life, that should be alive, that should be doing something, but they're dead. And, people were dying of HIV. People were like, this was happening. Like, I've got one roommate that I had the whole time that I was in the industry that's alive today. So my mom's concern for me was legitimate. But I just didn't believe that I could change. I truly believe that, even though my mom would say, you're better than this, I disagreed wholeheartedly. So hearing my mom, who I love more than anything and trust, say, you're better than this, you need to do something else, I couldn't hear her say that because I truly believed that that was the only thing I could do. So I can't change, Mom. So please stop saying it. And so I just stopped answering. So 18 months go by, and I haven't even heard my real name because everyone in my world was just calling me by that pseudonym because that's, I was on set, around 20 times a month. That's who I was. That's who I was known by. In that sphere, I'd become famous. So I would see people, in LA, in Vegas, out and about, and that's what they would call me. So I didn't correct them. I'm like, man. And so in a way, Joshua had died. So when the bank teller said my name, like, I woke up from this like plausible reality that was like I was numb to everything because of shame, pride, guilt. And I just kind of woke up to that. And the thing that made the most sense for me to do is go and call my mom. And she cussed me out. She was mad because she's like, I didn't know if you were alive or not. She was hurt. And then after she got everything she needed to say off her chest, she's like, I just want you to know that I'll always love you. I've never stopped loving you. You'll always be my son. And I want to say to you, for what I've said to you a million times, you're better than the way you've been living. Please come home. So I did, and I came home, but I just left the industry. I quit doing porn, but I like the beliefs, the pain, the trauma, like everything that I had done, like to my soul, the weight that I've deposited into my soul, into my mind, I brought with me. And then I just tried to build another kingdom. So it's like I started working in the health and fitness space. I got mentored by someone that he was the strength conditioning coach for the Carolina Hurricanes, and he just kind of brought me into his network, and I started, really being successful in that space. Opened a gym, was leading a gym, got a bunch of personal training clients, outsourcing, training to some private universities, even like Wake County, like SWAT team, like training them. Like, life is good, money is good. I'm somewhat respected, even though some people know my past. But I just try to, I say I try to put enough good dirt in my bad dirt so I didn't look dirty. It's like I didn't believe that I could change. So what I did believe I could do is I could manipulate how other people perceived me. And even though they knew that there were some things about me that were not so good, maybe I could do enough good to make me look not so bad. Yeah. And that went on for about 2 years, and then this girl wearing all Iowa Hawkeyes stuff comes into the gym. So like it's a CrossFit gym that it was really a strength conditioning facility that we used CrossFit as a like a long endurance form of conditioning. It was more like the conditioning methodology, but it was a strength conditioning gym. But she kicked everybody's butts in like every workout. And, she was a gymnast her whole life. She cheered in college, and she was just better at everything than everyone. And it's like gorgeous. And I'm just like, gosh, like this girl's amazing. And I asked her on a dinner, lunch, coffee, anything I could think of. No, and no. But it didn't, it didn't cause me to stop asking. And then eventually she was just like, I go for a long run before church on Sunday. You can meet me if you want. And I was like, I'll take whatever I can get. And as I'm waiting for her to get to the place where we're going to meet to run, I just begin to run this like scenario, like what I'm going to say, all this stuff. And then I'm like, man, looking back at like hanging out and like she trained, with us and stuff, and even did like a few like competitions, but she wasn't really like in our circle. So the people that hung out together a lot. Sure. And I was like, she probably doesn't know my story. Because if she did, there's no way that she would have, invited me to meet her here. So I was like, I gotta, like, it wasn't me trying to walk in integrity. It was me saying, let me get ahead of this before it hurts me. Because if she finds out, 1-2 dates in, she's just going to kick me to the curb, and that's going to hurt really bad. So if I nip it in the bud before it happens, it'll be, minimally painful. So I'm like, before the run starts, we're just walking. I'm like, hey, I just want you to know, like, I grew up like in a way where, my dad didn't want a relationship with me, and that was super painful. And that led me to do a bunch of things that I'm not proud of, including I did a lot of porn in the past. And, I've been out of the industry 2 years at this point, but I'm like, it's still all over the internet for the world to see. And this is who I am. I'm this kid that his daddy didn't want, and I've done all this porn. This is not things that I've done. This is who I am, is what I said. And she was, obviously very taken back by that. And we just kind of walked in silence for a little bit. And then she just kind of like stopped and like looked at me like super serious, like a teacher or a mom would. And she was like, hey, I don't want to minimize the trauma or the pain that you've experienced. I don't want to try to say that I can relate regarding your dad. I can't. But I do want to say that you're not defined by the worst thing you've ever done. And you won't be defined by the greatest thing you ever do, because you are not the author of you. God is. Do you know him? And I wanted I wanted to lie, because I had conditioned myself to put on this, like, I call it the first date mask. I'm going to do and say whatever I think you want me to do or say, so that you like me, because at the end of the day, I don't think much of me. So I'm going to try to become someone else so that you like me. So I'm like, you want me to be a Christian? Sure. I'll put on that mask. And it was like, I just couldn't speak. It was almost like, like something beyond me. Just like, I literally couldn't move or speak. And I just like stood there like a dummy, And then she was just like, well, I kind of like shook my head, no. And she's like, well, I've been following Jesus since I was in 7th grade. I'm not perfect by any means, but my relationship with Jesus is the foundation from which I live my life. So what kind of food do you like? What's your family like? I'm like, you're crazy.
She's an angel, bro.
I'm like, you're nuts. Come on. Because like what she did, it's like where Paul, absolute maniac, and Colossians 4, like he's in prison for preaching the gospel, praying for opportunities to preach the gospel, praying for an opportunity, praying to do it with clarity, walk in wisdom towards outsiders, and that his speech is gracious and seasoned with salt, so he might know how to, how he ought to answer each person. But it's just like what leveled me was both her certainty, but her grace. It was like truth and grace like collided and hit me in the chest. But what she said was that, hey, what you think your identity is based on is so far off. Like, you think that you created you, and your life encompasses things you've done and things you didn't have. Like, that contributes to the way that you like engage with the world, sure. But there is something beyond you that, exists outside of time, space, and matter that was catalytic in creating all those things simultaneously, including you, and he created you. So you think that your like most important moment is things that you didn't have and things you did. You're missing the point. There's a God that loves you and created you in his image. And if you could recognize that, understand that, it'll undo the things that you think are most important. And so it was like this opposite side of the spectrum, this other, worldview that was so different than mine. But what collided, it was that she was offering me a reality that was completely different than the one I was living in. And it was enticing. It created this curiosity in me, as the gospel should. And she we just like walked and talked, and then we texted all week, and then she invited me to church. And when I walked into church, I didn't think I had any business being in church, but I was going to follow that girl wherever she was going. And I heard this word. So the sermon was on 2 Samuel chapter 9, and it was David, Mephibosheth, Ziba, and David's. He's recollecting this promise that he made to Jonathan in 1 Samuel. He's kind of living in the tension of I just did this good thing for God in rebuilding the temple, and now how can I show God's loving kindness to His people? He's like, oh yeah. I made this promise to Jonathan that I was going to show him kindness and to his family forever. I wonder if there's anyone left in the house of Saul. Man, how do I figure this out? Oh yeah, Ziba, he serves under me now, but he used to serve under Saul. I bet he knows something, and brings Saul in front of him, Ziba in front of him. He's like, hey, is there anyone left in the house of Saul? Yes, Mephibosheth. He's in this place called Lodabar. He's at this dude's house, Makir, in this place called Lodabar. He's in this like desert wasteland, hiding at this dude's house. Why? Well, when Jonathan and Saul were killed when he was 5 or 6, this nurse like goes running with him. Why? Because historically he was next in line to be king, and he was on an outside kingdom when there was an established kingdom. So historically that person was killed. So that nurse thought, man, this baby, this toddler is going to be killed because he's next in line to be king, and he's a potential threat to this kingdom. So he ends up in this place hiding because he thought death was his future. Yeah. And then David sends Ziba to go find him. Mephibosheth is now grown man standing in front of him. And David's stoked to see him. Mephibosheth, and Mephibosheth was like, why are you so excited? I was like, to behead me. And David said, hey, I'm actually going to restore your grandfather's land. And it wasn't just any land. It was part of Canaan. So I'm going to give you part of this kingdom. And I'm going to invite you into my kingdom. I'm going to give you a seat at my table. Like, how would anyone respond to that? Like, how would anyone? It's like I like to compare it to, you go to a job interview, or you go to like a meeting with your boss, and you think you're going to get fired. No. You're actually getting a promotion. I'm going to give you my job. So grace is like a beautiful picture of this like undeserving merit, this undeserving gift that we just absolutely do not deserve. And how would most people respond to that? Wow, thank you. Mephibosheth, 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 8, he refers to himself as a dead dog. He essentially says, well, don't you know who I am? Don't you remember who my grandfather is? Like, don't you know what I deserve? And he was so certain of who he was, he couldn't even experience and recognize grace when it was offered to him. So I'm like, yeah, that's me. Like I'd heard, like he had led up to that point where he had talked about like Romans 3:23, Romans 6:23, Romans 10:9. He was saying these things that we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and that the wages of that sin, it separates us from God. And if we recognize that Jesus is the solution to that sin, and we confess with our mouth that He's Lord and believe that He was risen from the grave, that we'll be saved. And I was like, that's amazing for whoever that's for. But don't you know who I am? And then he read Hebrews 12:2. And it was something about the joy that was set before him. And I was like, joy. Like, where's that come from? What does that mean? And then God, at that moment where I had just a supernatural experience where God showed me moments in my life where I should be dead. And there was a good Father standing in front of me, in front of a bullet, in front of a needle, in front of HIV, protecting me in spite of me. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for me. And I did the only thing that made sense: fall on my face and repent and call out to Jesus to be my Lord, to be my Savior. And that moment shaped my life, changed my life. I was a dead man, became a live man, and pretty cool that girl's name is Hope. And we've been married. This is our 10th year of marriage, and we've got 4 kids. And and then I like, the thing that made sense to me is like, I was a good athlete, a good basketball player, but I wanted to be a great shooter. So I sought out a shooting coach on top of my basketball coach, where it's like I had success with acting. I had, there were some things that were just like natural that I had that like made me a good storyteller. And, there was these like aesthetic things that were like kind of out of my control. But as far as like how to walk a runway, like, how to project your voice, how to like do certain things, like how to learn like angles with camera where, just how do you get better at stuff? Well, you need a specific coach for a specific thing. So that had just been, I craved constructive criticism because I wanted to be good at my craft. Whatever I enjoyed, I wanted to be great at. So the thing that made sense to me is when I gave my life to Jesus, I need a Jesus coach.
Yeah.
I need someone to coach
Absolutely.
me on how to follow Jesus. So I go to the church and I knock on the door, and so that was, that I gave my life to Jesus on Saturday. This was now Tuesday. I go to the church and I ask, hey, is there anyone that will coach me on how to follow Jesus? And there was this guy, Andrew, that he had just graduated from DTS, and he was moving there to help launch another campus at this church. And he's like, man, I intended to meet with you, hear your story, and then, I was going to give you a Bible, tell you to read the book of John, and get you plugged into a small group. Like, that was my plan. And then the Holy Spirit just kind of like rebuked me and say, no, I need you to pour your life out into that man. And he was just like, I just feel compelled to say, I want to spend as much time with you as you'd be willing to spend with me. And he didn't know that he was talking to, kind of a diabolical, like thinking guy where I'm like, man, okay. And so I spent like 20 to 25 hours with him. I was like giving away like clients, like I was like paying other people like to run the gym. Because I just wanted to be at church. I wanted to be with him, and he taught me like observation, interpretation, application, like how to read the Bible, and how to understand context and all these things. But even more so, like First Thessalonians talks about how they didn't just read the word with one another; they shared their very own lives with each other. So he showed me what it looked like to follow Jesus. He showed me what it looked like to navigate conflict, to what it looked like to have discipline in your life, what it looked like to start your day with prayer, what it looked like to, to be a husband, to be a friend, to be a father. He showed me all those things. One of my favorite books is Master Plan of Evangelism, Robert E. Coleman, and he talks about how most people are not looking for an explanation. They're looking for a demonstration. And he demonstrated what it looked like to follow Jesus, and I'm forever grateful for that. And we still talk every Friday, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so I mean that shaped my life. And a few years went by, and then I had the joy of being educated here at Liberty, and like God's done some really cool stuff over the last decade. So that conversation with Hope. When I gave my life to Christ. So that was Easter 2014.
Well, I love your story, bro. And I want to start at part 2 here. So we're going to stop and we're going to start again because I have a lot of questions for you. And I know it's going to be very, very beneficial to our listeners. So guys, tune in back here next week. We have them back another time. So we love y'all. We'll see you next week.